hearing will come to order. Good afternoon. I want to welcome you all to today's hearing to consider the nominations of Dr. Roger Mason to be the Director of the National Reconnaissance Office and Mr. Michael Vance to be Assistant Secretary of State for Intelligence and Research. I want to remind all those in attendance that we welcome your presence here today, but the Vice Chairman and I have zero tolerance for audience disruptions. Verbal and physical distractions in this committee room are prohibited, including shouting, standing, raising signs, or making gestures that block the view of other audience members or cameras. Should any disruptions from the audience arise, rest assured I will not hesitate to have disruptors removed and barred from future hearings. Our goal for this hearing is to consider the nominees' qualifications and give members ample opportunity for thoughtful deliberation. On to the business at hand. Both Dr. Mason and Mr. Vance have already provided detailed, substantive written responses to dozens of questions from this committee. Today's hearing will give our senators the chance to hear directly from the two nominees before us, who are both highly accomplished individuals with impressive professional records. I want to thank Dr. Mason and Mr. Vance for their willingness to answer the call to public service once again, and I'd also like to thank their family members and loved ones, some of whom are here with us, others of whom are watching from a distance, for their support during what can be a lengthy and grueling nomination process. Our nominees today have many years of extensive experience in their respective fields. First, Dr. Mason currently serves as the Chief Growth Officer for B2X Corporation. He also previously served as President of Peraton's Space and Intelligence Sector and as Assistant Director of National Intelligence for Systems and Resource Analyses. Because of Dr. Mason's dedication and leadership, he has received the National Intelligence Distinguished Service Medal, the Intelligence Community Gold Medallion, and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency Medallion. Dr. Mason, drawing on your experience across government and industry in today's hearing, I look forward to your thoughts on how the NRO can work with the private sector to leverage commercial imagery, broaden the industrial base to fix various launch issues, and address the problem of overclassification in space control. Second, Mr. Vance currently serves as the Special Advisor to the Vice President for Asian Affairs and as the Senior Advisor to the Undersecretary for Political Affairs at the State Department. Mr. Vance previously served at the National Ground Intelligence Center, worked at the State Department Diplomatic Security Service Special Agent, and served as an analyst in the National Security Agency, during which time he completed details to the National Intelligence Council and the National Security Council. Mr. Vance, given your current advisory roles in the administration and your many years of analytical experience in the intelligence community, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the importance of providing policymakers with fact-based analysis and objective diplomatic reporting. As Chairman, I have focused this committee's efforts in part on returning our intelligence agencies to their core mission of stealing foreign secrets. As you know, the Bureau of Intelligence and Research plays an important role in validating those secrets and comparing them to diplomatic reporting. I'm eager to hear your views on this subject during today's discussion. Again, I'd like to thank our nominees for their many years working on behalf of the American people and for their continued willingness to serve our country in these new roles. I now recognize the Vice Chairman for his opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before turning to the witnesses, I want to address a development that underscores why this committee's oversight responsibility is so important. And let me be clear at the outset. This has nothing to do with the gentleman in front of me. And I also believe it has nothing to do with my Republican colleagues on that side of the aisle. I thought I'd seen it all. I thought I couldn't be shocked anymore. But the fact that President Trump announced today that Bill Pulte, the head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, will also serve as Director of National Intelligence, a choice that frankly stuns me. Beyond the fact that I guess he assumes that neither of these jobs are too important because Mr. Pulte is being asked to do both jobs simultaneously. When the role of the DNI was created, it was written into law that the person to be Director of National Intelligence should have some national security experience, let alone intelligence experience. I had a great deal of differences with Director Gabbard, but I never questioned her background commitment to the country, her willingness to serve, her national security expertise. Mr. Pulte has none of that. Zero. No time in the military, no time in Congress, no time in the diplomatic corps, no time in law enforcement. This individual is, at this critical moment, is being asked to come in and help oversee our intelligence community at a time when we face unprecedented threats and adversaries. It is an insult. I think it is an insult to folks like Mr. Vance and Dr. Mason and the thousands of the people in the intelligence community who serve to keep our nation safe and have the ultimate responsibility to be willing to speak truth to power. What qualifications, from my standpoint, does Mr. Pulte bring to the office? Well, he has shown that he is willing to do anything that President Trump wants, legal or otherwise. He has taken the Federal Housing Agency colleagues and weaponized private information to be used against the president's political opponents in terms of Lisa Cook or Adam Schiff, the senator, our colleague. And now, because of that record, we're going to say, well, let's turn over all of the intelligence classified information to this guy. Does that make sense? You know, the chairman and I have been working our tails off. And it's been a really strong working relationship to make sure that we make the case to our colleagues and the American people that the intelligence community's most critical tool, Section 702 of FISA, which has been in the past not used appropriately, which has been used in the past not to inappropriately touch Americans. This is a tool that's supposed to be foreigners talking to foreigners abroad. We put reforms in. We've seen the FBI performance dramatically improve. Now I got to go and try to convince my Democratic colleagues and, frankly, some of my Republican colleagues. We're going to put somebody in who's shown no respect for private information, who's got no experience in national security, to be director of national intelligence? You know, what does that say about the president's view of our intelligence community? It's strangely enough that this guy is able to serve. You know, and we will try to find ways I will try to find every way I can to prevent it. He will also be able to serve, at least according to the rules, for 6 months. Well, strangely enough, that 6 months gets him past election. I've raised repeatedly efforts by this administration, I believe, to potentially politicize our election. But turning to today's nominations. Dr. Mason, it's good to see you again. I'd like to welcome you and your family and congratulate you on your nomination to be Director of National Reconnaissance Office. If confirmed, you'll only be the second Senate-confirmed Director of NRO, because this committee, this is such an important agency, we added a Senate confirmation. And again, I want to compliment you. As you know from your past experience, the NRO is responsible for our overhead, the intelligence satellites that deliver sensitive information to the IC and DOD. You know, one of the things we talked about, we got to make sure the NRO and the NGA get on the same page all the time, and we got to make sure that the new Space Force and Space Command, which the President created, and I think generally is in the right direction, needs to work better together. But I want to make sure that the unique culture that is at the NRO is not subsumed by this new Space Force. I also think one of the things that makes me very interested in your nomination is you've got the commercial experience. I thought for a long time the NRO was reluctant to actually partner with commercial. So I think that's good experience, and I look forward to working with you. Turning to Mr. Vance, we've not had a chance to visit much, but I also want to congratulate you and your family on your nomination to lead the State Department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, the INR. Now, I believe the INR has always punched above its weight. It's been willing to be the outlier, way back even to the Iraq War. And it's been clear that the INR has never been willing to bend to political pressure, even when that pressure, I think, was exerted back years ago. The INR as well, you guys were, I think, the best on your pointing out with better, I think, accuracy than most other the IC about Putin's intentions in Ukraine. You got it right again. So we need that honest, apolitical analysis more than ever. And mostly because the INR folks, I think, have got deep expertise and relationships all around the world. That's so important. And again, I know you were, I doubt that in the middle of the night last night you were called by the president to say, can we run Pulte by you first before you go forward further? But I do think one of the things I'm going to hope, and I hope I can support you, is that that you will stand up for those capabilities inside the State Department, not bend the analysis. We've seen too much of the State Department, I believe, get hollowed out. So I look forward to this. I don't apologize, but Mr. Chairman, I've gone past my time, but I could not start without addressing that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Dr. Mason and Mr. Vance, before we move on to your statements, I need to ask you 5 customary questions that our committee poses to each nominee who appears before us. They require merely a simple yes or no answer for the record. However, if you answer no, we will stop and you will have to provide a lengthy and no doubt unpersuasive explanation for your no answer. Number 1, do you agree to appear before the committee here and in other venues when invited?
Yes.
Could you please turn on your microphone for the benefit of our reporter?
Yes. Yes.
Number 2, if confirmed, do you agree to send officials from your office to appear before the committee and designated staff when invited?
Yes.
Number 3, do you agree to provide documents and any other materials requested by the committee in order for it to carry out its oversight and legislative responsibilities?
Yes.
Number 4, will you ensure that your office and your staff provide such material to the committee when requested?
Yes.
And number 5, do you agree to inform and fully brief to the fullest extent possible all members of this committee of intelligence activities and covert actions rather than just the chairman and vice chairman?
Yes.
Thank you all. Thank you both. After our hearing today, for the benefit of senators, it is my intention to move to convene a committee business meeting as soon as possible to vote on these nominations and report them to the Senate for a floor vote. We will now proceed to opening statements, after which I will recognize senators by seniority at the gavel for 5 minutes each. Dr. Mason, you may begin.
Chairman Cotton, Vice Chairman Warner, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to consider my nomination for Director of the National Reconnaissance Office. I want to thank President Trump, Secretary Hegseth, and Director Gabbard for their trust and confidence in me to return to government service and fulfill this important national security position. I'm here today with several members of my family, my wife Colleen, my mother Sandra, and my daughter Caroline. Family is my bedrock, and I'm grateful beyond words for their support, sacrifice, and unconditional love. First, I want to thank my parents, who instilled in me the importance of being accountable, the value of hard work, and the promise of education. I'm here today with my remarkable wife of 30 years, Colleen. She inspires me every day and sets the example of selfless service to others in our family. Together, we are incredibly proud of our 3 children, John, Joseph, and Caroline, who are just now beginning their own lives based on those same values. I was born only a few miles from here in Alexandria and have since been a lifelong resident of Virginia. Growing up, my parents pressed the importance of education to my sister and I, and we became first-generation college graduates. For me, applying science to solve hard problems was the passion for learning. This drive resulted in earning a PhD in engineering physics from the University of Virginia, which gave me a strong foundation to begin a career in national security. In my first job after graduate school, I led teams to develop, deploy remote sensors into a global system linked by satellites for national security missions. Simply put, I fell in love with the mission and devoted the next 32 years of my career serving it through government and industry. Over these 3 decades, I honed my leadership experience, skills, and abilities to enable me to bring the right leadership at this moment in time to the NRO. As president of a space and intelligence business, I led a multi-billion-dollar organization with over 4,500 employees that provided advanced manufacturing, products, services, and solutions for every phase of space-based missions. I was honored to serve as the first Assistant Director of National Intelligence for Systems and Resource Analysis, driving strategic capability investments, developing intelligence requirements, and conducting independent cost analysis on every major system acquisition. In that role, I also gained valuable insight across all intelligence missions, from the strategic to the tactical, from counterterrorism to foreign military combat capabilities, and everything in between. Today marks an incredibly important and exciting time for space, not seen since the NRO began the dawn of space intelligence in the 1960s. We are in a space renaissance, where the pace of technology, the speed of innovation, and the promise of future has drawn unprecedented investments from many sectors. The future of space and how our nation can use it for good seems limitless. The future of space, however, is also contested. Adversaries are in a race to build their own capabilities, as well as counter space measures capable of denying our nation's critical space missions. If confirmed, my priorities will focus on elevating NRO's strengths and emphasizing 3 major areas. The first, accelerate the next generation space architecture that integrates proliferated and exquisite capabilities to produce integrated intelligence data at mission speed. The second, enable NRO to push the leading edge of space technology and innovate even faster. And the third, ensure enterprise-wide resilience from space vehicles to the ground and everything that connects the agency. These priorities will only be achieved by a vibrant, mission-focused workforce and critical strategic partnerships. The NRO workforce is the heartbeat of the organization, and it demands full attention of its leadership to attract, develop, grow, and retain its world-class talent. To deliver success, NRO strategic partnerships with the military, intelligence agencies, and our allies are essential, and we must continue to work closely with an expanding space industry. All of these relationships must be built with strong communications, transparent processes, and a spirit of problem solving. Chairman Cotton, Vice Chairman Warner, and distinguished members of the committee, I conclude these remarks by giving you my commitment that, if confirmed, I will bring the best of my energy and skills in service to the nation to lead the NRO with the strength it deserves and the future vision it demands. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Mr. Vance.
Chairman Cotton, Vice Chairman Warner, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I am honored to be considered for the position of Assistant Secretary of State for Intelligence and Research. I have too many people to thank to give everyone the credit they deserve for getting me to this point. But I do want to express my gratitude to the President for his confidence and to the Secretary of State for the trust he has placed in me. I would also like to thank my wife, Alessandra, for her patience and loving support over the course of my career. She is with me here today, along with my oldest son, Wyatt. I also want to thank my parents for the example they have set for me in life. My mother, a retired Dickinson County, Virginia school teacher, taught me the value of education. My father, a former coal miner turned small business owner, taught me about hard work and dedication to family. I know they are watching today from home with my 3 youngest children, Morgan, Ellis, and Mabel. Finally, I would like to thank the many colleagues from across the intelligence community, the State Department, and the White House who have offered encouragement throughout the nomination process. If confirmed, it would be a tremendous privilege to lead the Bureau of Intelligence and Research, an organization with a proud tradition of analytic rigor, independence, and service to U.S. foreign policy. INR plays a unique and indispensable role within the intelligence community. Its officers provide objective, policy-relevant, all-source intelligence analysis and support rooted in deep expertise and an understanding of diplomacy, ensuring that policymakers receive assessments that are candid, timely, and free from political influence. At a time of increasing global competition, persistent conflict, and rapidly evolving technological challenges, the demand for high-quality intelligence has never been greater. If confirmed, my foremost priority would be to safeguard the integrity and independence of INR's analysis, while ensuring it continues to meet the needs of the Secretary, the Department, and Congress. I also recognize the critical importance of partnership within the Department, in the intelligence community, and with our friends and allies overseas. INR's value is magnified when it understands the Department and its needs, collaborates effectively across agencies, and integrates diplomatic insight with intelligence collection and analysis. If confirmed, I would work to strengthen those relationships. Equally important is our responsibility to Congress. I'm committed to transparency, timely engagement, and forthright communication. Robust oversight strengthens our intelligence institutions, and I would view my relationship with Congress as essential to the Bureau's success. Finally, I would be deeply mindful of our obligation to the dedicated public servants of INR. Their expertise, professionalism, and quiet dedication underpin the Bureau's reputation for excellence. If confirmed, I would prioritize supporting and developing this workforce, ensuring they have the tools, leadership, and trust necessary to carry out their mission. Thank you again for considering my nomination. I look forward to your questions and to the opportunity to serve our country.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Vance, I want to return to something the Vice Chairman pointed out. INR has on occasion been the squeaky wheel in the intelligence community, more willing to dissent, less likely to go with the flow. The Vice Chairman pointed out one apt point, and that was Putin's intent to invade Ukraine. I can recall clearly multiple hearings in which the heads of many other intelligence agencies beat around the bush and said, well, we don't know, maybe we could see him saying it's a training mission, or it's a signaling mission, or what have you. And I'm like, really? Because they have 150,000 troops on the border at Christmas time. You don't normally do that to your troops and their families and for a training mission. And they brought a bunch of blood to the front lines. And you don't normally bring fresh blood, which is perishable in a number of weeks, to a training mission as opposed to an actual military operation. And INR was the only one willing to raise its hands like, yes, we actually think he's going to invade. He wrote a 5,000-word essay about it last summer that said why he was going to invade. You've been around the State Department a lot. You've been around the intelligence community a lot. To what do you attribute INR's traditional willingness to swim against the flow and make sometimes unpopular but ultimately correct assessments?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the question. You're correct. INR has long, I think, culturally defined itself as being an organization that prides itself on intellectual independence. I think that can be at least partially attributed to the fact that INR analysts are empowered in a way that analysts in other parts of the intelligence community are sometimes not. For example, when I was an analyst in INR many years ago, I was a China military analyst there. I covered the entire Chinese military. And then eventually we hired a guy to cover conventional forces, and I moved to strategic forces, but we had two people who were covering the entire Chinese military for INR. Speaking for the State Department with authority in National Intelligence Council meetings, that sort of empowerment, I think, encourages analysts. It gives the analyst a sense of confidence. And I think you can have that confidence in your analyst when you hire the best people possible. INR has historically, I think, done a very good job of attracting elite-level talent and retaining that talent. Should I be confirmed to the role of INR Assistant Secretary, one of my top priorities would be to continue that tradition of attracting the best people possible, ensuring that they're happy in their jobs, that we can retain them over the long term, because deep expertise, I think, is one of the calling cards of the organization and allows you to provide your analysts with a long leash and give them the freedom to go out and actually have opinions and to make the hard calls.
Thank you. Well, like I said, they've often swum against the tide. I don't agree with every single report I get from INR, but when they dissent from an otherwise community-wide consensus, I think they need to be taken quite seriously, given their record of success. I want to touch on a more specific issue. INR's Office of the Geographer and Global Issues serves as the U.S. government's authoritative voice on sovereignty and geographical claims, including for intelligence that is provided to policymakers. If confirmed, can you assure us that this office's work will remain free of bias, that it will accurately represent U.S. views and policies?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. I can absolutely assure you of that. The Office of the Geographer, I think, is a unique capability for INR. It's a service that it provides to the department and, frankly, to the entire U.S. government. It's essential.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Dr. Mason, the NRO is currently hampered by a limited supply of launch providers and failures among those it is relying on to complete future constellations, as regrettably we saw with Blue Origin recently. Are there systemic issues with NRO's launch enterprise that you would like to address as NRO director?
Chairman Cotton, I view launch and the diversity of the launch providers as something that is essential for the NRO and the Space Force, and essential in a couple of ways. The first one is the government needs a diverse industrial base of launch access providers. The second piece is the launch infrastructure also needs to be diverse and make sure we are resilient in that regard. In terms of working with the Space Force, which, if confirmed, I will commit to do, understanding and increasing that competition in terms of the launch providers would be really important. When I look at the National Security Launch Program, Phase 3, there are 3 providers. There's SpaceX, there's ULA, and also Blue Origin. Of course, different capacities for different types of vehicles. It's a growing market, in my mind, and one where even new entrants for different size vehicles will be important as well. So if confirmed, Senator, I would commit to working with the Space Force to ensure that we have launch diversity and launch resilience in the
Thank you. It couldn't be more critical. We've had testimony on this committee and on the Armed Services Committee that without those commercial providers that you mentioned, SpaceX, Blue Origin, ULA, potentially new entrants, we would not have the current lead over China in launch capacity that we have. So it's vital that we work with them and we get more faster. Vice Chairman.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I also want to just make clear for the record that the fact that Dr. Mason's from Virginia and my hometown of Alexandria, and Mr. Vance got parents in one of the coolest communities in Virginia, in Dickinson County in Southwest Virginia, will have no effect on how I judge the qualifications of these guys. Is that all right?
Once again, Virginia sucks all of the intelligence community's resources into its expanding vortex, leaving not even a few scraps for Oregon and New Mexico.
Reserving the balance of my time. Dr. Mason, quickly, what do you think? Should NRO be merged into Space Force?
Vice Chairman Warner, first of all, thank you for making the time. I enjoyed meeting with you, again a few days ago. Senator, Vice Chairman Warner, no, I do not believe the NRO should be part of the Space Force. When you look at the NRO's mission in terms of providing intelligence to the policymakers all the way to the warfighter, it is rightfully placed as both a defense agency and an IC element. And I believe that placement is a strength, and one that if you were to move, or if that move into a military service, or for that matter an IC agency, that we risk degrading that strength. That strength is also because of its personnel, in terms of, as you well know, the composition of the NRO, a third-ish of CIA, NRO cadre, and then the military, mostly the Space Force. This is important, and I believe it's placed appropriately.
100% agree, and I know you'll be committed to maintaining that culture and that style. We talked about this as well, but I'd like to get you on the record on it. I don't think we've maximized all our capabilities, as we sometimes have overlap and brushback between NRO and NGA. We got to make peace in the Valley. I know you know about this. Please speak briefly to it.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. The relationship within NRO and NGA is interdependent. The two organizations are dependent upon each other to deliver successful intelligence. If confirmed, my commitment would be to, first of all, examine the relationship. Where is it working? Where is it not? Examine the processes, and more importantly, to take a spirit of problem solving to the relationship, to understand how it can be improved and to make sure that we are doing the best for the nation in terms of that mission. So you have my commitment.
Yeah, and I think there's an opportunity now. We've got relatively new leadership at NGA. You'll be coming in at NRO, and past frictions. I think we can leverage all of that better. I want to get to Mr. Vance, but I also want to echo and I appreciate the fact that the chairman asked this, and I wholeheartedly agree. We've got to have diversity and variety in launch vehicles, and the notion that we have to look at commercial, and our space industry needs that support, and I appreciate your comments there. Mr. Vance, I really appreciate your comments in your opening statement about the independence and the willingness to kind of get the best people possible. I hate to say too nice things about the chairman in the same 5 minutes, but the fact that he also acknowledges how when NRO, your agency gets it right, INR gets it right, is important. One of the things, and I briefly just reiterated that again, but more specifically, one of the things we've seen with INR after DOGE, lots of folks got cut out. We've got a number of requests in for information. We've had, unfortunately, a lot of failure to respond to the oversight that I think is so critically important. So give me a statement again about independence, and then talk about how you're going to respond to oversight from this committee.
Excuse me. Mr. Vice Chairman, thank you very much for the question. Should I be confirmed to the role of INR Assistant Secretary, I would, of course, be more than eager to work with this committee to ensure all of our obligations are met in terms of keeping this committee apprised of all developments within INR, and, of course, responding to any committee RFIs. Regarding independence and analytic independence of the organization, I am, I've got nearly now over 2 decades of intelligence community experience. And I can tell you that one of the things I am absolutely committed to is analytic independence and observing ICDs 203 and 206. In the course of my career, I've served as a tradecraft reviewer. I've had the opportunity to serve at the very center of the intelligence community in OD&I. I've served out in the various agencies. And one of the things I've always prided myself on is a commitment to professional ethics and an appreciation for the separation between policy and analysis.
I appreciate that, and I'm not going to have time to ask you, but I would say one of the things you responded to me from my colleagues was the need to have more commercial diplomacy, and in INR looking at not just at governmental entities and military entities, but our competition with China is oftentimes in the commercial sector. So I appreciate your comments.
Senator Cornyn.
Dr. Mason, and I'm of a age that I remember when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, and of course the space race with the old Soviet Union, and everybody sort of understood the importance of that that competition. But now, of course, there's interest in an enduring lunar presence. And I wonder if you might just take a minute and talk a little bit about why that should be important to the American people, that we establish an enduring lunar presence.
Senator Cornyn, in terms of our dominance in space, and again, looking from the outside in, lunar presence is important for not only further planetary exploration relative to a stop, for furtherance of that exploration, but also in terms of, you mentioned competition with other nations and our adversaries, and understanding what needs to be done in terms of understanding the strategic placement of that. The President's executive order in terms of space superiority very clearly lays out that dates for which we will populate the moon and start the lunar base, and then to include, from the perspective of understanding any threats, characterizing those threats from very low Earth orbit all the way to cislunar. So critically important in that regard, Senator.
Is it important we get there first,
Senator,
as opposed to the Chinese? Or?
Senator, I believe it is important that we get there first. The first mover advantage in terms of space exploration, or getting the high ground, or getting the most coveted territory, comes with getting there first and getting there in substantially.
And I know the chairman talked about the importance of commercial providers when it comes to various missions run by NASA and the NRO. Explain why that's been important in terms of American dominance in space and the ability of the NRO to accomplish its mission.
Senator, the commercial industry, space industry, and I won't just say commercial. When I speak commercial, I speak very broadly. From commercial launch to commercial satellite communications to commercial imagery providers, all a major part in terms of the NRO. When I left government 12 years ago, it was a bolt-on. There were one or two companies. And now, because of low-cost access to space, it has literally revolutionized how we're able to do the architectures we want to do. And if confirmed, I would absolutely endorse that and actually try to strengthen it even further. Expanding the capabilities of commercial industry sparks innovation, it sparks lower cost, and gives us capabilities that we couldn't do 10 years ago that now will be an incredibly generational part to a new next generation architecture.
Mr. Vance, I'm going to pick your brain about is in your role as an expert on China, as a China analyst, and your work on China's nuclear capabilities and doctrine. But since we're in a public setting here, obviously, and we need to keep that in mind, but can you speak to the results of President Xi's purging of his top military leadership, what that means in terms of his confidence in the capability of the PLA to do things like take Taiwan by 2027? What should the American people know about President Xi's capabilities and intentions?
Excuse me. Thank you, Senator, for that question. It's an important one. By my own count, I think over 100 senior Chinese generals have been purged in the last several years. I think the Central Military Commission is now down literally to 2 people, Xi Jinping and 1 remaining Chinese general.
He must be kind of nervous, I would imagine.
Yes, I think he should be probably nervous. He's in charge of internal discipline, so he could be next. Of course, Zhang Youxia was purged earlier this year. It suggests in my mind that Xi is probably not terribly confident about the reliability of the PLA at this point. The strategic rocket forces were particularly hard hit, and of course the strategic rocket forces would play an essential role in both deterring U.S. intervention, and at least in the minds of PLA planners, but also projecting power regionally. So I would suggest that it's encouraging from a U.S. standpoint that hopefully Xi isn't terribly confident in PLA capabilities moving forward, and it certainly doesn't seem to be letting off the accelerator on the purges either.
I assume we shouldn't relax in response.
Senator, thank you for that. I would suggest not relaxing, but I do think this creates a window of opportunity for us to continue investing in our own capabilities, of course, keeping in mind that the situation in the Taiwan Strait is dynamic.
Thank you.
Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it was good to visit with you this morning, Dr. Mason. I got a lot out of that. My opening question to you would be, the ongoing National Reconnaissance Office Director gave a speech about the agency's use of artificial intelligence. This is obviously a fast-moving technology. My own view is that there needs to be aggressive oversight. What is your view on the need for guardrails and safeguards with regard to the agency's use of artificial intelligence?
Thank you, Senator Wyden. I too enjoyed our conversation. I appreciate you making the time this morning. The first part of the answer to this question is really the excitement that AI is generating. When we think about this next generation proliferated architecture, AI is what's going to be able us to do this at mission speed, where humans just can't do it just from the synchronization standpoint. Getting more important to your question, one of the things that Director Scalise and the NRO has done that I have researched as part of my preparation is they've actually published a AI kind of governing document in terms of the strategies. And in my mind, it's laid out very well. It talks about the objectives. It also talks about risk management. And it talks about governance. So if confirmed, I would follow that priority that having some type of guardrails, And understanding what the limitations and the risks are equally as important as understanding the benefits that AI can unlock.
Okay. Mr. Vance, I didn't get a chance to talk with you, so I'm just really thinking about some of the documents I've read. And Mr. Chairman, Chairman Cotton, I would ask unanimous consent that an article written by Mr. Vance entitled Greenhouses and Stones Confronting Europe's Soft Authoritarianism be entered into the public record.
Is there objection? Without objection, it will be entered into the record immediately following Mr. Vance's extensive written answers to your written questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vance, in the article you wrote that European politicians should be more interested, and I quote here, serving the native populations of the continent. Now, my parents fled the Nazis in the 30s. Not all got out. My dad was fleeing and became part of our army, was one of the famous Ritchie boys, and they escaped Germany in the 30s when Nazi anti-Semitism was rooted in the myth that so-called Aryans were native to Germany and Jews were not. So I found this language in the article, and as I say, we haven't talked. All I have is the article. It was deeply disturbing. I asked you in written questions to clarify, and your answers, again, just to me were quite disturbing. You wrote, and I quote, centuries of connection for people to be part of a community was what it takes. And my first question to you is, by this kind of calculus, how many hundreds of years do you believe it ought to take before people can be full citizens?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. Of course, the essay wasn't an attempt to identify or to define or to make a determination about who the native populations of Europe are. The essay was actually about DRL and the annual human rights reports. But in response to your question, what I would say is that determining national identity is something that's very complex, and it's something that academics have struggled with, frankly, for centuries. If you look at Italy in the mid-19th century, during the process of the Risorgimento, very famously an Italian statesman said, you know, we have made Italy, now we have to make Italians. So the notion of Italian national identity was something that was consciously forged by the Italian state over a course of many decades. In contrast to that, I would point to the Basque and say that Basque people have lived in Basque country literally for thousands of years. So there's I think, a tension in the social science literature between kind of the conception of the nation as a fundamentally cultural entity and the nation as a political entity. In reality, most nations fall somewhere in between, including both elements of kind of the civic national identity, as well as a sense of kind of cultural continuity and connection to place that I think is commonly associated with nationhood.
Let me see if I can get one other question in. You wrote that politicians are only legitimate if they protect, quote, historical, cultural communities, so there was kind of more of the same. But I want to close with a final question. Apparently you called Western Europe authoritarian and argued that repression in Western Europe is similar to the Soviet Union. Do you believe that today?
Senator, actually, I think I referred to the late Soviet Union, and I'm not a scholar of Soviet studies, but there is a very distinct a difference between the character of state oppression in the late Soviet Union and the early Soviet Union. In the late
You don't believe it today?
Senator, what I would say is that I stand by what I wrote in that article, and I think everything that I wrote in that article is entirely consistent with U.S. policy.
Thank you. I'll have to observe, I've got the article here in front of me, that this critique of the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor is apt. They have long undercovered the lack of free speech rights in many European nations. I don't think they're like Soviet Russia, but most European nations don't have anything like our First Amendment. I remember being at the Munich Security Conference with John McCain in February of 2016, right after large populations of migrants had sexually assaulted German women across the country on New Year's Eve, and these German officials tried to deny that it happened at the very time that they were trying to suppress online commentary about it. So I'm not going to answer for every single thing that Mr. Vance wrote in his article, but I would say it's not at all beyond the pale to say that European nations should do a better job of protecting the free speech rights of their citizens. Mr. Budd.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you both for being here, for your willingness to serve and your prior service. Dr. Mason, Are there any activities currently underway at the NRO that, in light of your vision, need to be changed or revisited?
Senator Budd, when I look across the enormity of the NRO and what they are doing, I would first describe it as the NRO is engaged in a generational opportunity and a generational challenge with respect to the next generation architecture. And so, if confirmed, the areas that I would look at to ensure that we're getting proper attention is actually leading change. NRO is a remarkable workforce. It's arguably, a national treasure. Through any period of change, having the importance of doing it very intentionally, understanding what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, is an area that, if confirmed, I would absolutely give attention to in that regard.
I appreciate that. Can you highlight some of the best practices at the NRO that should remain distinct from the Space Force?
I'm sorry, Senator, best practices? Or?
That would remain at NRO that should remain distinct from the Space Force.
Yes, Senator, I do believe NRO should remain distinct from the Space
How about
Force.
practices at NRO that should be kept separate? Is there any that you would particularly list?
In terms of practices, Senator, I wouldn't necessarily list any of those that should be kept separate. Clearly, there are two missions that are well-defined from a Space Force perspective: organize, train, and equip the Joint Force. NRO providing intelligence for the policymaker or the warfighter. What I would also say is that the relationship with NRO and Space Force is also very important, and the collaboration is really the cornerstone of space dominance. So, if confirmed, I would also attend to make sure that the relationship stays vibrant and also stays very healthy in terms of resource allocation.
Appreciate that. Dr. Mason, in your pre-hearing questions that you answered, you highlight the difference between the NIP, or the National Intelligence Program, and the MIP, the Military Intelligence Program, and how you previously worked with both the DNI and the Pentagon to ensure the right balance and oversight of those intelligence programs. So based on your experience, what types of activities are more appropriately resourced under the NIP versus the MIP, and how does that affect the acquisition process and the oversight of those activities?
So, Senator, based on my experience at ODNI, there were several different areas, and actually we formed at the time a NIP-MIP working group to do exactly what you were doing. There were no clear guidelines one way or the other, but some examples are, for example, if a capability was being developed by the NRO where the military needed more of to decrease latency, in other words, getting the satellites back in terms of a certain target faster. That would be a clear area that would be augmented at the time in terms of the MIP versus the NIP. I can't speak to the current laydown in terms of how are things done, but in terms of the closer you get to warfighter support in that regard, probably the more it's applicable to the MIP relative to the NIP.
Thank you. What do you think some of the biggest challenges are, or the single biggest challenge, if you will, that NRO faces in this increasingly complex space domain?
Senator, without question, it is contested space. Again, when I left government, we were just as a nation getting religion on space protection. Now it is pervasive. Our adversaries are developing capabilities, both in terms of their own as well as countermeasures. So without question, space protection is the biggest challenge. And going back to one of my priorities up front, that's accomplished through enterprise resilience. So in other words, not just the space vehicles, not just the ground, it's the connection points, it's kinetic, it's cyber, all of the above. And so if confirmed, enterprise resilience is an area that I will take a deep look into to make sure that we are protected now and well into the future.
Thank you. Mr. Vance, if confirmed, what aspects of state INR would you keep in place, and what changes will you make to enhance the effectiveness of INR?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. Should I be confirmed to the role, I would be eager to sit down with the INR front office and hear their input, but one of the priorities for me would be revitalizing academic outreach. I think that's essential to the intellectual life of the Bureau, and I'm not exactly sure what the best strategy is for that. It's something I would want to consult with the INR front office and with INR office chiefs to make a determination about that. But I do believe that a robust relationship between INR industry, the scientific community, and the academic community is essential.
Thank you, and thanks to your families as well.
Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Mason, congratulations. I know how closely Air Force and NRO work in my home state, where NRO has an important ground station. If you're confirmed, would you consider visiting the New Mexico NRO station, as well as potentially deepening NRO collaboration with the Air Force Research Laboratory there?
Senator, if confirmed, I will look forward to visiting New Mexico and those facilities. Absolutely.
You know, in your in the answers to the pre-hearing questions, you noted that threats to our space and ground systems are growing. Talk to me about how your experience in government and in industry, how would you approach the issues of resiliency and survivability of space and ground systems at NRO?
Senator, the enterprise approach really is just that, in terms of thinking about the different aspects of a system. And again, we tend to spend a lot of time in terms of the space vehicles and the kinetic threat.
Yep.
But the reality is that's just one piece of it. The non-kinetic, whether that is through electronic warfare, whether it's through jamming, and quite honestly, the one that has the least barrier to entry is cyber.
Right.
And that's the one that has my full attention. In terms of industry experience, clearly zero trust systems are the gold standard. I understand that in government as well. And if confirmed, I would want to do very early, taking a good look at the posture and to make sure that we're well protected, to include getting third-party assessments as well.
Current Director Scalise has said that given the diversity of NRO's user community, a quote-unquote unity of effort as opposed to a unity of command most efficiently leverages NRO resources to accomplish national security objectives. Is that an approach that you agree with?
Yes, Senator, it's an approach that's working very well in my mind, looking from the outside in, and one where I would continue as well.
Finally, talk to me a little bit about, you know, what you learned in your private sector positions and what we should be, how that can be applied in your new role as Director of NRO.
Senator, the areas where the relationship between industry and NRO clearly is critical. And so from an industry perspective, the things that most well-run companies want is, first of all, predictability in terms of demand. So understanding where the government, in this case the NRO, is headed in terms of requirements, not just a year out or 2 years, but 5 years, 10 years, is very important in terms of making those investments. Most industry wants a chance to be able to earn a good, fair profit, as well as be rewarded if they perform well. And so I would say the main thing is understanding the forecast in terms of requirements, predictability, and then consistent communication throughout the acquisition cycle.
Gotcha. Mr. Vance, your career has included a number of important analyst positions, as well as your time in the diplomatic security service. But obviously, this role oversees roughly 300 full-time positions. Talk to me about your management experience and give me a sense of what the largest number of full-time employees you've managed simultaneously.
Senator, thank you very much for the question. You're quite correct that my career has been focused largely on analysis. I began at the National Security Agency, did a couple tours in ODNI, worked in INR, and then later at NGIC. During my time in DS, though, I was an assistant regional security officer, which I had the opportunity to manage fairly large teams. I managed the surveillance detection team in Kabul, for example, which was about 45 local Afghans. I managed the Threat Intelligence Fusion Center when I was in Kabul. I was the director of that center. I think we had about 20 U.S. contractors and federal employees under my leadership there. So yes, absolutely correct. I've spent most of my career as an analyst, but I do have some management experience as well, sir.
A former director of the State Department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, Ellen McCarthy, wrote last July about the budget and personnel cuts that the Bureau faced in 2025. And she, in her analysis, deplored the loss of institutional memory, regional fluency, analytic rigor, and the highly experienced people who understand that intelligence and diplomacy, these are her words, are two sides of the same coin. Are you concerned about the personnel loss that has occurred in this department?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. Recruitment and retention would be, frankly, my #1 priority should I be confirmed to the position. Ensuring that we have continuity, especially in certain critical roles and certain critical functional areas as well as regional areas, I think is absolutely essential. So it is something I'm concerned about and is one of the first things I want to look at.
Thank you, Chairman. Senator Langford.
Chairman, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you. Thanks for stepping through this process. It's a challenging process and very time-consuming and a lot of paperwork to be able to fill out to be able to go through the process. So appreciate very much going through this. Mr. Vance, you have had a very unique role in that you've served with diplomatic security as well. That's a unique role to be able to walk alongside that as well. So in this role, between INR and diplomatic security on it, I'm not sure there's been a lot of communication between the two. My question to you is, should there be? And if so, what should that be?
Senator, thank you very much for asking that question. I think it's an important one. You're quite correct. Historically, I don't think there has been a tremendous amount of dialogue between those two bureaus.
Yeah.
Frankly, when I was in INR, I didn't know that DS existed. I thought of DS as just the people who checked my badge when I came into the building. It took time for me to understand that we had this robust presence overseas where special agents were providing security services at our embassies overseas. Once I learned about that and I realized how cool the job was, I decided that I wanted to try it. I became a DS special agent for, I think it was about 6 years or so. My vision, at least, for how these two bureaus could collaborate is INR analysts are exceptional at providing strategic level insight. DS has its own intelligence organization, which I think is excellent at providing the tactical level support which that bureau relies upon for threat indicators and warning. I think if you synthesize those two things, I think you get a really complete picture that can allow senior department officials on the 7th and the 6th floors to make really good informed decisions about how we allocate resources to augment security overseas, how we can prevent attacks, because of course one of the most important responsibilities for the department is to ensure that our diplomatic personnel and all chief of mission personnel serving overseas are well protected.
I would assume the diplomatic security folks would want to be primary users of that intelligence information, or at least have access to it, or should have the ability to be able to ask the questions to say, do we know anything about X? Because if they're moving people or trying to be able to sustain security, they'd like to have a heads up of what threats are out there. And it seems like they would be the primary issues of asking questions to be able to chase that. Is that happening now? How would their communication work so they could ask those questions?
Senator, thank you very much for that question as well. I don't have a good insight to that. When I was in DS, as I said, we had a number of organizations that were providing tactical level support to us overseas. I'm not clear on exactly how much dialogue there is between the two bureaus on this. I think there is probably in some cases a classification challenge. I know that in the course of my IC career, I started in 2002 at the National Security Agency. There's been this massive proliferation of subcompartments. I think that creates some dissemination challenges, especially for our folks who are overseas, who are operating on SIPRNet terminals. So I think that would be a challenge that would have to be overcome in some instances. But I can assure you that one of the things I'm excited about is getting with, should I be confirmed to this role, speaking with the Assistant Secretary for Diplomatic Security about how we can strengthen bureau relationships.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. I apologize, I had to step out for just a moment. Dr. Mason, this might have been asked already, at least I would hope it's already been touched on. If it has, I apologize for it. And that deals with the deconflicting and the tasking of commercial intelligence right now. And so many other areas. NRO is everyone's favorite entity to give them a job to do and to say, we need your help, but every other entity wants a little piece of that. There's a unique role in trying to be able to say, they want this, they want this, they want this. How do we actually accomplish all that? How do you begin to establish the priorities and how to deconflict and how to be able to make the decisions of yes to this group, no to this group, or 2 years from now for this group?
Senator Langford, when I look at the responsibilities of the NRO in terms of an NGA, NRO clearly is responsible for building the capabilities and building the capacity to be able to respond to those requirements. I'm very mindful that the tasking and the priorities will actually come from the functional managers. In the case of the commercial imagery, that will be NGA. In the case of maybe RF that'll be through NSA. So if confirmed, I would view my responsibility as making sure that capacity is there and that it's a capacity capable of growing.
Yeah, but you have to decide which capacity you're going to be able to build at any point. I mean, that's the challenge, that everybody wants it to be done today. You've been in the private sector where you can make a decision today and try to be able to do that in the next couple of months. Public sector, even with NRO, which is very agile, it's a different challenge to say, how do we actually move and what are we going to build and what are we going to do?
Yes, and I see the basis of your question now in terms of the plans and the architecture versus today versus tomorrow. And so that's working closely, again, with the functional manager. One of the things when I was in the ODNI, we were responsible for IC requirements, and we tackled this exact issue that you are raising. And in terms of the role of the functional manager is not just looking at the current tasking, but stepping out in terms of what does this look like 5 years from now in terms of the threats. And so there's a very sophisticated process in terms of the priorities from a national intelligence perspective. And so I would rely, if confirmed, on that relationship of understanding what's coming, in this case, the ODNI, the NGA, and the NRO as the provider to make sure that we are building those capabilities in a time frame that they're needed. So.
Okay, thank you.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Warner, you mentioned that Dr. Mason is from Alexandria. We learned this morning we grew up in the same neighborhood in Alexandria, so I can top that. Dr. Mason, there's been some talk about the use of commercial satellites, and of course that's been a development since you left and now come back. Talk to me about how important that is. The philosophy I've heard is buy first, build second. Do you subscribe to using commercial operations where they are appropriate and useful, as opposed to having our own well-defined satellites and architecture?
Senator King, thank you again for making the time this morning. I too enjoyed our discussion and learning more about our collective backgrounds. One of my top priorities that I mentioned in my opening statement is this next generation proliferated and exquisite architecture, an architecture that the current director and NRO is well on their way to achieving. So when I look at that architecture, there's a need for both. There's a time for exquisite and there's a time for proliferation. But to get to the heart of your question, that we have to look differently at our requirements. And this is being done, as I understand, look from the outside, that maybe a commercial system doesn't satisfy 100% of those requirements.
80% solution.
80% solution at a much cheaper cost usually, and a much faster time to get on orbit. So look.
And proliferation is in itself a defense. One of the issues, of course, is space is now contested. Proliferation makes a more complicated targeting problem for our adversaries. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator. Proliferation in itself is a measure of resilience.
Final question on space. I see opportunities for coordination with allies. Again, it's space, and members of this committee visited Pine Gap in Australia several years ago, and particularly with the Five Eyes. Again, I'm thinking about budgets and how do we conserve our precious tax dollars. Is there opportunity, you think, for doing more coordination and cooperation in the space architecture with New Zealand, Australia, UK, Canada?
Senator, it's my understanding and experience, prior experience, that the relationships with the Five Eyes in particular are essential, and it's integral to make sure that they are strong. At the same time, also to your point about burden sharing, I do subscribe to that it's important to make sure that we have a good balance relative to both what the U.S. is bringing as well as the allies. I'm not familiar with all the current activities that are going on them, but if confirmed, I'll commit to making sure that I examine those and to make sure that they're, again, robust and vibrant, balanced relationships.
After I was at Pine Gap, I was sure it was deeply classified. I was afraid to talk to anybody about it. I got back here and turns out it's a Netflix series, so that dispersed that idea. Mr. Vance, in your opening statement, you used the word independence 4 or 5 times, which I really appreciate. You use the phrase candid, timely, and free of political influence, integrity, and independence. This isn't an academic concern. If you look back over the past 60 years, I think many of our foreign policy disasters that have cost American lives were based upon not faulty intelligence, but intelligence that was biased in favor of the views of the policymakers in charge at the time. Vietnam, Bay of Pigs, Iraq. Talk to me about the importance of the integrity of the analytic process and the willingness to tell the President of the United States or the Director of National Intelligence or this committee something that we don't want to hear that is inconsistent with our policy preference.
Senator, thank you very much for that very important question. Analytic integrity, a willingness to speak candidly about the content of the intelligence record is absolutely at the core of intelligence work. We do policymakers no favors by telling them the things that they want to hear. We do them, I think, a much greater service when we're able to speak authoritatively about the content of the intelligence record and to share that with them in a respectful and helpful way. I think and one thing I can tell you about my own career is that in the course of now nearly 24 years of working in the federal government, one thing I've never been accused of is bending the intelligence record to suit a particular policy narrative. And it's certainly a part of the INR's longstanding organizational tradition, which is speaking candidly about the content of the record.
A quick follow-up. Who won the presidential election in 2020?
Senator, thank you for the question. Joe Biden was certified as President of the United States in January 2021.
Did he win the election?
Senator, again, Joe Biden was certified as President of the United States in January 2021.
I'm uncomfortable with your discussion about independence if you won't answer that question directly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on what the chairman was getting to earlier, and also Senator King, about valuing dissent and speaking truth to power. It's something I've valued in my career in the Navy and at NASA. I think you understand that the best solutions, come from encouraging people to speak up when they disagree. What Senator King just brought up is a specific and very public case of individuals who are not willing to speak truth to power. I was going to ask you an example of a time you've actually done this in your career, and just right now you gave the counter example, which is this election was certified. There were dozens and dozens of lawsuits, and we hear that same answer repeatedly from folks that are nominated by this administration that come before a committee who are specifically told to give an answer that is not consistent with the truth. So I want to encourage you after this hearing's over, and we're about to conclude it because I seem to be the last person, but I really want you to think about that. You talked about the independence of this agency and the job you're going in, assuming you're confirmed. But I know for myself and others, that gives us a lot of pause when it seems like when necessary, you'll support the concept of valuing dissent, but in the moment, it became very hard for you to do it. Having said that, I've got another question I want to get to about North Korea. Your background is in proliferation, East Asia. You talked in your opening statement about China. I'm also concerned we don't provide enough attention to North Korea as a threat. Could you talk a little bit about how INR, just like maybe 30, 45 seconds, how INR will contribute to the work, and if confirmed, how you can work with us to where we can do a more focused and better job there?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. It's a very important one. North Korea's nuclear arsenal, of course, has expanded significantly since its initial nuclear test in 2006. It certainly would be a priority, in my mind at least, to view North Korea not simply as a traditional proliferation challenge, but as in fact a strategic forces challenge. That is, assessing North Korean nuclear capabilities and doctrine as a deployed force as opposed to simply a proliferation challenge.
Well, thank you. And for Mr. Mason, I got about 2 minutes left here. You're going to be filling some big shoes, taking over for Chris Scalise, somebody I've known for over 20 years, maybe 25 years. He's done a fantastic job. Just want to get into, we had a mishap, Blue Origin, with their New Glenn rocket. Have you thought much about the implication of that? You talk about, the high-end, exquisite assets. It's a heavy lift vehicle. It's got damage at the pad. Have you thought from your perspective going into this job, assuming you're confirmed, how that has an impact on our ability to get a proliferated and an exquisite constellation?
Senator, yes, I have. When we look at the launch providers, and there's three in this category. It's SpaceX, it's ULA, and it's Blue Origin. And we're reminded that this is still rocket science. And others are more mature. There's some first moving advantages, but we need companies like Blue Origin and new entrants beyond that to be successful. Space Force just put out a press release right after the incident announcing that they had awarded a contract to Blue Origin, not for the heavy lift, but for a different vehicle for the NRO. And to me, that sends a very clear message that this is important to us. The industrial base is needed, and we need to make sure it's resilient just as much as the government is.
So you see a quick path forward maybe to them getting back on the step here?
Sir, I haven't researched the details in terms of what the mishap was. I did read that the damage to the pad wasn't as extensive as thought, so that's promising news. But if confirmed, I would look forward to understanding that in more detail and to see what we could do to help our partners with the Space Force.
Yeah, I think rebuilding the pad is probably the long pole here, and probably takes longer than trying to fix whatever the issue they had with the rocket. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just want to add, echoing what Senator King and Senator Kelly said, Mr. Vance, you're going to get confirmed, I'm sure, but your ability to get confirmed as a bipartisan leader on a part of our intelligence community that's always had the courage to speak truth to power, you took a giant step back with me today. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. As I mentioned earlier, it's my intention to hold a committee vote on your nominations as soon as possible. Therefore, for planning purposes, any senator who wishes to submit questions for the record after today's hearing, please do so by close of business tomorrow. Thank you all. This hearing is adjourned.